Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'm Tyler. I'm one of the organizers of the Buffalo Data Group with Oliver's help. Yeah, I'm going to talk tonight about community. So when I say community, what is a community? It's when you share geography or you share an interest. It's kind of a shared anything sort of situation. And why should you participate? Well, it brings an awareness of events that are going on around you, like Code Days, for example. It gives you opportunities to mentor students or be mentored. Gives you an opportunity to make friendships. No students in the room, but if there were, I would point out that once you graduate, your friendships are going to be the people you meet at work, pretty much. Or the people that you carry forward, your friendships from college and university that you manage to carry forward. And so community gives you an opportunity to meet other people, meet new friends, expand your friendship circle. Gives you opportunities for career development, find out about other interesting things people are doing, find out about other communities in your area, or about other companies operating in your area that are doing similar things or interesting things. And it challenges your comfort zone. Gives you an opportunity to step outside of sitting on the couch and watching a hockey game. And it gives you swag sometimes. There's some swag back there if anybody wants any. So how do you participate? Well, you got to find something that you're interested in and that you have the desire and interest in participating in and contributing to. And you got to show up, even if you don't have much interest in a specific talk or don't know much about a specific technology. You might learn more than you expect just by showing up, and people will always be glad to see you. I know we have a lot of people in this group that religiously show up even though they don't necessarily understand everything, and they pick up bits and pieces every time they come. Socialize, talk to people before and after meetups, get to know people. Share your interests, get to know the interests of others. Share by speaking. This is one of the ways that I learn something. Usually if I'm giving a talk, it's not necessarily a talk where I'm talking from strength. Often I'll spend several hours doing research before writing a talk, just to, this one is not an example of that. But I learn more by preparing for a talk than I often do just doing a day's work on a specific topic. Creators, suggest an event. If you're not seeing what you like in your community or what you're interested in, suggest one. And the other big one is evangelize for your community. When you're at work, tell the people you're working with about these interesting talks that you're hearing. Tell them about the groups that are operating in the area and make sure that they're aware. If you go to a conference, tell them about, even if it's not in Buffalo, tell them about the interesting tech scene in Buffalo and all the meetups that we have. Because people visit Niagara Falls in the summer and they might drop by. So what are some local resources? Well, one of my favorites is Buffalo Devs. They run a Slack group that's open to the public. It's free. They have hundreds, and they might even be over 1,000 developers in that group now. They have some great GitHub resources as well. They have a listing of local tech companies. They have a listing of companies within that group that regularly offer internships to students. They have listings of the local active meetups on there. It may not be complete, but it shows you which ones are active. Meetup and Nextplex is obviously another good way to learn about these. Nextplex is more local. It doesn't have as much nationwide interest. They are in multiple cities, but Meetup is the the big gorilla in the room. Look for local conferences. Now this mentions Code Days, which we just had. I'm on a committee planning a conference for next fall for here in Buffalo. Not going to say any more than that just yet, but we should be publishing things probably sometime in January, and then we'll do a CFP. Most of all, you get out there and start your own community if you're not seeing something you like. It doesn't have to be tech community. Keep that in mind. I'm involved with groups that do outdoor things. Going on hikes and stuff like that. There's a group I'm involved with up in Ontario that does camping and survival skill exercises. So I just joined that, haven't gone to any meetups yet, but I'm really looking forward to the first one. So they were doing one in the winter and I was like, that's not a good one to cut my teeth on. The other thing that I like to do is when I'm in another city traveling for business, I like to, if I've got a night off, I look up the local meetups. I've been to Pivotal in New York City. I've been to Austin on Rails in Austin, Texas. I've been to a Crate TV meetup out in San Francisco, and I've done some of the Ruby meetups up in Toronto. So it's always a lot of fun. You meet people outside your area. I have tech contacts in Austin, Texas now because, and people know me down there because I went to their meetup. So just a quick reminder slide, our sponsors of this program are Engineered and Stark and Wayne. Their sponsorships expire in February, so if anybody is aware of a local company that might be interested in joining the sponsorship, it's pretty cost effective. Stark and Wayne will probably renew. We don't know about Engineered yet, but just figured we'd throw it out there. All right, thank you.
More of a comment. Just recently they started a Buffalo Linux group at Tech Systems, I think they're on meetup. Their first meeting was last month. Their next meetup is next Monday.
Oh, cool.
So as another local resource that may not have made it into all the other lists yet.
Probably not, yeah. We had a Linux group here for many years, but they had gone dormant, so it's great to hear there's a renewal of...
Somebody pushing something new, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that mailing list is still live, so people are still monitoring it, but they don't meet anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Where did that Linux group meet? How are they listed?
They're on meetup.
Oh, okay.
Just if you go to Buffalo and search Linux, it's the first thing that comes back.
Never thought of typing in Linux. I always write Ubuntu.
Yeah, you probably won't find one that specialized here.
There's also, the Rochester Hackerspace has a Saturday Linux meetup. But that's a little bit far for a lot of people for some reason.
Yeah.
I'm like you, I travel, so.
You know where Tech Systems is? It's out by the airport.
It's 300 Arrow Drive. They're next to Sodexo.
Nice. All right, thank you.
There's apparently also a Buffalo Linux.
Separate one?
Just not a meetup, just a Buffalo distribution. A distribution called Buffalo Linux.
Oh, okay.
Is that like the animal or this place?
It might be part of, does it say Buffalo Lab at the top there? Because it could be part of the local hackerspace, but.
Enhanced version with database and code.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't know that.
Yep.
McAllister?
I won't talk to you guys, please. I won't talk to you.
About?
Hardware resource. I still have a bunch still have some budget left, I gotta use it for the end of the year.
Hardware resource, I can use some of that.
I'll bet you could.
Just check.
Later on. Okay. So I've actually left Twitter. I still have Mastodon set up, so that's probably a better, the Fediverse is a better way to reach me. Okay, so this has absolutely nothing directly to do with databases, except insofar as this basically is a way to build a database that you can do some cool stuff with, and is the lightning talk. So, hi, I'm Oliver. Also, will run this with Tyler, and I want to talk about a tool that I kind of stumbled onto earlier this year, and I've already kind of convinced one person that this is a fun toy to play with. See if I can make it some more. Quick show of hands, who has one of these? Okay.
In about a week.
All right. Well, so there's a bunch of these smart speakers out there, and these are kind of horrifying from my perspective, but they have their uses. You set them up, and then you go over there. You ask it to open the garage door or something, and then whatever device is there shows up and opens the door for you.
I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that.
Yeah, that doesn't always work. Sometimes there are bugs. Sometimes there are business things that get in the way. And sometimes, well, these devices kind of spy on you. Oh wow, that didn't color correct. It's supposed to be like a little creepy dude looking in the window there. So anyway, point being, I'm kind of terrified of these devices. I would never want to have one in my house, but I think the things that they do are really, really cool. Like, I want to be able to say, open the garage door, or play this album, and I want that to actually happen. So my talk today basically is meant to raise people, call to action, get people to take ownership of their data, take ownership of all of the smart stuff that happens in their house. And how do you do this? Well, Home Assistant is kind of like an operating system for your house. So just like an operating system is a piece of software that, who here actually is like written the ones and zeros out to talk to your disk drive? Like actually, okay. So, the operating system normally takes care of that. The operating system gives you a simple language that you can use to talk to all of the hardware in your computer, whether it be a hard drive, a Wi-Fi card. Those devices talk in a language that the operating system can understand. You talk in a language that the operating system can understand, or programs talk on your behalf, and then everything can communicate. HOS is the same way. So there are plugins for all of the smart devices that you can think of. So you can talk to all of your smart speakers, smart lights, smart garage door openers, smart thermostats, smart phones, smart whatever. It has a whole bunch of interfaces that let it talk to cloud services. It has a bunch of APIs for common, if you're building your own hardware, your own sensors, it can talk to those. And it can talk to anything, even like chat services. It has basically, I just checked this before the talk, supports 12,062 different components as of the most recent version. And more are getting developed. That number was about 1,000 a couple of months ago. So people keep developing new components for HOS, and essentially this lets all of those devices talk to one another. It provides a common set of functions that you can call to like turn on a light. And if you buy a smart light bulb from Philips, or a smart light bulb from, I don't know who else makes smart light bulbs, but you buy light bulbs from 2 different manufacturers, this gives you one API that all of those can talk to. You have a smart speaker. this can hook that smart speaker up to all of your devices, and you decide to replace your Google smart speaker with an Amazon smart speaker, or maybe a Apple, slightly more privacy-focused one, you can do that without making any serious changes to your home's infrastructure. You can all talk, keep talking to one another. So what can you actually do with this? Well, it gives you a bunch of tools like trigger-based automations, or lets you program scripts to trigger at various points in time, or when you, for example, ask something of your smart speaker. What I specifically have done, just to give you some, whoa, that's weird. So specifically what I've done is, so I've built a little sensor on my sump well. If the sump well starts overflowing, it displays something on a couple of screens throughout the house. You can't see it there, but it's also got, I've got a bunch of temperature sensors throughout the house. I used that actually to figure out that my computer was raising the temperature in one of my rooms by about 1 degree. That's kind of horrifying. So I started shutting that computer down. Saved a fair bit on power now. I haven't done this yet, but have it setting, I plan to have it monitor my garage, see if someone's moving around in there, see if the door is open, maybe have a camera in there to see, we kind of rent out our garage to my wife's chorus. Sometimes they come in and take some parts from there. I want to be able to see that. Supports talking to my router, so I can see, I'll show you this in a bit. I have it monitoring my wife's snake, controlling monitoring the temperature, controlling the heat lamp. I have it managing all of my home entertainment, so kind of getting my stereo to talk to the device hosting all of the media files, talking to the device doing all of the music. And then I've also started playing with this other tool called Snips, which is a self-hosted voice assistant. So it sits on a Raspberry Pi somewhere, and literally, you have to go to a web service to configure it. But once you download the kind of training data, it just sits on the Pi. Doesn't have to talk to any other server. So you basically get most of what you get with a smart speaker, but you don't have to give up your privacy. You just have to give it a Raspberry Pi. This also has it's a little bit of a hobby, and in that sense, it does, one of my colleagues, Eric Zola, phrased this best: it scratches many itches. So it scratches my programming itch because you can tell it to do stuff using Python. They have a simplified scripting language built out of YAML. It lets me get my home improvement itch out. It makes tons of data, lets me generate some pretty graphs. I like doing that. Gets my hardware, lets me do hardware hacking. And I guess my biggest irritation is when I have two devices and I want those two devices to talk to one another, but they can't. This lets me do that. So what does it look like? You basically have in addition to all of the scripting stuff, you've got kind of a web interface. It gives you a web interface that you can use to control media, keep track of who's home, weather, other things, and of course graphs. Lets you generate lots and lots of pretty graphs. So that's it. I encourage you to check it out.
Before I get to the serious question, did you know that you were making like a double entendre there with monitoring your wife's snake?
Now that you say so, I see it, but no, that was not intentional.
So, the invents thing that goes on? At the first meeting we had, one of the guys was talking about assistance for old people and disabled people. People that have lost their sight over time with age. And the gist of it was they were trying to get some something started with devices that can, through a smartphone interface maybe, help them find their way. You know, devices that would integrate in their life and notice that they're too narrow of a thing for the walker to get through before they get there with the walker. I don't know, anyways, this seems like you might have, should have been involved in that.
I could see this being useful in the sense that it makes it easier to take off-the-shelf hardware and software and shovel all of that data into one centralized thing that can then analyze it, respond, and react. So Home Assistant alone doesn't necessarily solve any immediate problems, but it gives you a fantastic platform on which you can build other stuff. Because, like I said, 1,262 different ways of dumping state into Home Assistant, and then a bunch of, it provides a bunch of tools that let you then monitor and react to different changes in state. So for that particular use case, there'd still be a lot of work to do on top of this, but yeah, this might be a good building, like foundation to build that on.
One of the pieces of the puzzle.
What kind of hardware does this run on? Is it like, can it run on a Pi, or is it?
Yeah. They have a version of this that I think it's called Haas.io, that is just, you download it, it's a full distribution that sits on a Pi.
Oh. An old Pi.
I don't know offhand what the requirements are, but they're not huge. The graph rendering is all done on the front end. The actual amount of data that you're talking about is, I mean, it's not small, but it's not huge either. Even a Pi 1 probably could serve as a decent backend.
I was going to say with the graphing, it'd probably be Gen 2.
Well, the graphing is done on the front, is done in JavaScript.
Oh, it's done in JavaScript?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it was the 1B that had networking, right?
I don't even
The one
remember.
that I
I
did.
just got a stack of them that. I mean, they have a whole bunch of different distributions of it. I have it sitting in a Docker container on my computers. Snips also, if you download Snips, it gives you the option to install Home Assistant on the same Pi that Snips is running on. So you can just have one kind of Pi controlling your entire house, for better or worse. Right. Whatever you want to speak about, it is going to be more interesting than 5 minutes of awkward silence.
Oh, that's so awkward.
Could say awful too.
What, the stars it?
There's a comment.
There goes Ken.
Hi, I'm Tony Nash, and my talk tonight is on Graphics Magic. It's a command line program I just started using to edit photos of my paintings for the web. And it's fast and it's easy to use. And you can view the files that you make using an image editor, so you can see what you're doing, because the command line makes it hard to see what you're doing with images. I'm going to show a few slides that I made using that program, and then hopefully do a little demo of a few commands. So you can add text to an image. you can create frames and borders, do different things like a monochrome image, and you can do this with a command, and you can do this with the same command,
Really bad goes dead.
and you could do those things, you could do this, but I would never do this. And no one should, let's face it. So here's some screenshots. You can also do screenshots with the program. Here's some information about it. And here's something from their website. So you can use it with different programs. And here's some of the commands. So you can do a lot of different things with it. And I'm really excited about it because it's so fast. You know, you can work with lots of programs at once.
Bless you.
So I want to show a few examples using a small group of my paintings. And here's that group of paintings. And you can see the cat down here, if you look closely here. But really, you know, I made this with that program. And here's the paint, so let's see. So
Those are cool.
now we'll switch over to,
So you made a gallery in this program?
yeah, this is using a montage command, you know, to take a whole group of images and make one image from them.
Cool.
So next I just want to show a couple commands. So here's the group of paintings. The first command I want to show is how to crop an image so I can get a detail. Here's a picture. And here's the command to run to crop an image. So you take that image, the geometry of the size of the image that you want to create here, where you start with here, the image that you'll be editing here, and then the resulting image here. See if this works. Probably works. So there's a detail. So next, I just want to show how to take a group of paintings and or pictures, any images, and work with all of them to create a group of monochrome images.
Is this only Linux?
Good question. I'm not sure.
It runs on Mac OS X as well. You might be able to get it for Windows under a, what is that thing called?
Cygwin?
What's that?
Cygwin?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, yeah. May work there. This is a very mature package.
Okay, cool.
So with this command, the Morgrify, I think it's called, you know, it's for working with groups of images, and we're going to change them to monochrome and specify the output directory, which is titled monochrome, and otherwise it will overwrite the images in the files. Whoops. And let's see, maybe test change, it's a paint command. So this will turn a painting into another painting. And it has a lot of, one of the things I love about these tools is that you can do so many different, make so many different things using, just, a few simple commands. So here we are, the paint command, and this. Oh, there we go. So it's better than ever, as far as I'm concerned. And that's it. Any questions?
How long have you been working with this?
Program?
Yeah.
A few weeks. So, yeah, you don't have a lot of, a lot of depth of knowledge about all the different things you can do, but there's a lot of them. And I, been meaning to try something like this. This is a fork, I think, of Image Magic, which is, so it's been, a bunch of years since I've been wanting to start using this because it's, it's so fast, it works so well and, it's so easy to do so many different things, so. So I'm glad I had an opportunity to do it, and it's a big part of it is just to do this talk, I kind of said like, okay, I'm gonna try it, see what happens,
Easy to get working?
Pardon me?
Was it easy to get installed and get working?
Oh, yeah, it was really easy to download and install, it just seemed to work.
Do you still do your web development in Drupal?
No, good question.
Oh, okay.
I was hoping somebody, no, I'm using Amazon S3 for a static site for 50 cents a month.
Because I think Image Magic is one of those things that you have as a plugin in Drupal.
You can, yeah.
And like these command lines that you're showing, I think that must be how they automate the image processing in Drupal. Because you can let somebody upload an image, and then it'll automatically make all these different versions for different screens.
Okay, yeah, I know they have. I think they had an option to use that or some other program like Image.
Yeah.
And
Like
you could choose.
Booth or something was one of them, or something, I forget the name of it.
I think it's really cool that you painted all these to start with. This is
Yeah.
Thanks, yeah, well, that's what I studied in school, and I still enjoy doing that a lot, so. And I started doing websites, so I could have something to do with it, to publish them.
Second row, second column. Which park is that?
Next to the shark.
I think it's Letchworth State Park.
Oh, okay.
Or no, I'm sorry, Chestnut Ridge.
Okay. I was gonna say, it reminds me of Chestnut Ridge.
Yeah. Most of my landscapes are out there, or, some other parts around the area.
I'm interested in doing digital creation, but there's a really cool package called Krita that I just came across. It's amazing. Krita. When you go to those tablets, it's got like the pressure sensitivity and all that stuff. You can do some pretty amazing, just like different brushes, colors, your layers and things. It's really pretty slick.
Yeah, they make tablets as well, I believe. Krita
Oh, really?
makes tablets. Maybe Because I've seen people say, like, I read a lot of web comics, and people that draw a lot say, well, I'm using this program or using that
Yeah.
program, so.
Yeah, that's actually how I came across the Critter et al. Was
Yeah.
I just saw some guy's things, and I'm gonna do this entire comic all in open source software. And like, the art was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Like, this is neat, so that's where I found
Yeah.
Critter, tried to play with it. Discovered the art.
Actually don't know.
This is the Visual Basic, as you saw behind the timer. I usually go over time, so I'm going to try not to do that this time. So, this is my first semester teaching at UB. You know, I used to teach at Herbert. And oddly enough, the course I'm teaching is Applied Business Programming, which is 8 weeks of Visual Basic, and then the last 8 weeks, the last 7 weeks is PHP and MySQL. Hopefully, I've taught them enough concepts in the first part of the course so that they can do the project I assigned them in the second part of the course. So, just to talk about a project that I assigned my class, okay? Rough and dirty, just to get the idea of them doing a project, because I'm going to have them all next semester for systems analysis and design, and we're going to talk about how they killed themselves doing this project when they should have had some kind of way of doing it. That's another project entirely. So basically the structure of web development works like this. Your browser talks to the web server, in our case Apache, which has a PHP engine in it, that goes and talks to the MySQL server, which gives information back to Apache, is interpreted back through the extension in PHP with Apache, and then feeds it back to the browser. This is what I gave them in the class. Okay, so CRUD, guys, everybody knows what CRUD is, right? Everybody not know what CRUD? This group should know what CRUD is. Yes, right? CRUD, create, retrieve, update, and delete files, which you should be able to do. So that's what I decided to have them do. Most projects that will do CRUD will try to have you go and do the create records first. This I found I left to last. Why? Because from the retrieve page, I was able to create pages that would then update and delete and then leave the retrieve for last. So I got basically 3 pages in PHP, pretty much copy and paste with just the change of the MySQL, the SQL command. Okay, pretty simple, pretty easy to do. This is how I wanted them to turn the project in, with a comment that has the name who's in it. By the way, Curly's real name was Jerome, the Stooges. So, first thing I'm going to do is have them make a table out of this. All right, so it's show the table. You know what? I'm going to slide on over here. I'm just going to go on over and show how to do it. Oh my goodness, I've spent almost 3.5 minutes already. I don't have anywhere near enough time for this. Okay. See how time flies when you're having fun? Okay, so the first one is show all customers. So you create a table, have it go read your SQL, MySQL database, and so that's this one here. Nope, not that one. That's one of my students' projects. Okay. So the top here makes a table header. connect to the database using the MySQL Connect, MySQL iConnect, which went up from MySQL from version 4 to version 5, and has stayed since up to version 7. Then I have a query, SQL select all from the table, execute it. I'm going to set this, we're setting each function to a variable. So the variable here, records, is going to be going and actually performing that query. And then I have a while loop that loops through each field in the record. So while row, here's the all PHP variables start with a $. And then go and get each one of these, and it produces this page, okay? Loop through here, and then we're done. And my HTML on top sends me back, okay? Update is a very similar thing. It's the same without the ID number. That's hidden, and we'll make we'll set that to work in the update query using that as a where clause, and there's submit buttons all the way down. But the code for this, none of this code is very difficult, okay? The code for update is actually quite simple. And I did it two ways. The first way I did it was using the array that's created. The form creates each row on that page, excuse me. Updated. Right, say make the connection, show it, same way as it was before. Okay? So here I'm going to fetch the records, and each of those lines becomes a form, and send it to the action page, update PHP, and the last tab, the last field is an input type, and I'm going to have the number hidden, the value of the number hidden. So that if you want to update something, it'll just pop it right up. Right? And when you post something, it creates an array in PHP, whether you know that or not. And so what I did originally was I indexed them by the inputs, which is kind of clumsy, and it makes it hard to debug because of all the double quotes and single quotes. So for my second approach to this, I set all those elements of the array, their own variables, and actually this is a lot easier to do. It's a lot, the update query here is much easier to work with, update customer, and the where clause sets it with the ID, and then it runs. Okay? And there's some error trapping in this. Equally simple is the delete. Just show you that. Any minute now? Okay. And the function delete is in the last, just like we had an update, it would trigger the update query. This will loop through all of these. Oh, look at that. I'm going to have to go back and fix that. Might be a good idea. But you get the idea, right? Update, delete. And the last one is to add a customer. It's an insert query, and the form is different. Why did I teach this one last? Because if you figured out how to do the first one, the other two are pretty easy, fairly simple to do. Right? How much time? I'm over time, aren't I? I'm like way over time. So that's what I did for my class, and so far I've had a couple of, I've had quite a few of these projects turned in of variable quality, and But this was, what I wanted to show you is a simple project that you can have your class do. And that's really what I got. Any questions?
Have you had any students that have gone beyond and applied a development framework to producing the solution?
Elaborate.
So like a PHP development framework, I can't think of the names of them right now.
PHP MyAdmin is how I have them use. They are also concurrently taking MGS 402, which is a management database course, and they have them use PHP not PHP. They have them use MySQL Workbench, which I think PHP MyAdmin is a hell of a lot easier to use.
So when I'm talking about framework, I'm talking about tooling that helps you build an application for a specific language. So Ruby has the Rails framework. And
I know what you're talking about. No, we
will
haven't
help.
done anything like that. I want to get them this far.
No?
I gave up on PHP a long time ago.
I had them do, this I had, and I'm really kind of surprised. The big thing I had them use was not for this, but for CSS, using Bootstrap or Dreamweaver. And that made I have a couple of those projects here. They look pretty good. So, ask.
So this is all part of the LAMP framework that you used to be.
This is actually, I'm doing this in WAMP.
Apache.
I'm doing this in WAMP. This is right in Windows.
Okay.
And Uniform Server 13 that I'm using, you just literally download it and start running it. There's nothing to it. It's the simplest thing I've ever seen.
So it's not Apache or a Linux?
It is Apache, but it's WAMP. It's Windows,
Okay.
Apache, MySQL, and PHP. The only problems you run into is if you're running another, like MySQL Workbench, it has a port conflict, and you have to change the port you're using. That's, and
Where I was going with it is, what I heard is the development community seems to be moving away from PHP and MySQL and more towards other,
Python and
yeah, exactly, Python and,
Go and all kinds of.
yeah, and PostgreSQL.
Absolutely.
I guess Laravel is the top
Laravel? Yeah.
for PHP
Yes,
right now.
okay, Laravel's the top. I actually recommended Laracast, because there's all kinds of free trainings on PHP from Laravel that you can get, some hours and hours and hours of free training, including training on how to use Laravel. But, question in the back.
When you finish.
Okay, no, they haven't been doing that, but they're using PHP MyAdmin rather than working with the SQL directly into MySQL. So,
So my last experience with business students was that, I don't know how you got people to sign up for the course. Like making a table in Access was a mountain to go over for a business student. So, like, how many people sit in your room?
87.
Jesus.
This is the biggest class I've ever taught. Usually my classes, when I was at Hilbert, the biggest class was 24.
Did it become like a required course in one
Yes.
of their tracks? Oh,
This is a
okay.
required course if you want the MIS concentration for your BS in Business Administration.
Okay.
This is a required course. And I've done my best to make it as relevant as possible. With the Visual Basic, I put every week a Visual Basic for applications thing, including my timer and VBA for Access, how to do, my favorite one is actually, you can set you can put an application that reads back to an Access database that all they can do is add records to it. They can't update or delete records. All I can do is access. It's pretty cool because you're linking rather than actually giving them access to the entire database. And you can only do that in VBA. So I've had a lot of fun with this. I don't have hair to pull out. So, this is, how did I get him to do it? They had to. But they're smart kids. I constantly underestimate them. The grades are incredibly high for this course. I'm going to upgun this course next time I teach it. They're really smart kids. I'm very proud of them. So, thank you very much, and I'll get on to
Plenty of opportunity to jump in front of me.
So now we can do 15 minutes of awkward silence until Nate starts.
Exactly how I planned it.
Do we pause the video for 15 minutes of awkward silence?
No.
You're
YouTube
probably
should
gonna a lot
get the
of
full experience.
exactly slow TV on YouTube. Watch a whole bunch of tech people in a room not speaking.
So, yes. And to answer your question, yeah, it's tough. They're fighting uphill with this, but at least they're fighting, they're doing stuff, you know? 87. Teaching 87 students programming in a lecture format. More fun than I had thought possible. Thank you for putting up with my going over so much.
Yeah, no worries. I think the first time we did lightning talks here, we let everybody go over like 15 minutes. So we're doing fine.
Okey dokey.
We were all here till like 10 o'clock that night.
Should set up a.
Rolling thunder meetings instead of lightning.
Yeah.
So, this is
Bad for the eyes.
probably, I'll try not to get too, there's gonna be a little bit of text display, but mostly this is a very early stage project. Tyler and Oliver have seen it briefly last time we were here, and I figured, this is something that's been a passion of mine for, let's just go 20 years. Since I saw the first 3DFX Voodoo 2 graphics card, it seemed to me that there was something amazing that we could do with 3D graphics. And the first project I had a chance to work on was back in school. We tried to create a three-dimensional window manager for X Windows using the 3DFX graphics card. We actually created something that kind of worked. But since then, I moved on. I had done nothing with graphics for years and years and years. But as I moved through my career, I learned a lot of different things that kind of all kept pointing back to the same thing. That same thing ended up being, I really wanted to create a three-dimensional operating and software development environment that didn't involve metric tons of typing. I've been coding since I was 13. That's just say that's 30 years ago. And while I love the creation, I don't necessarily love all the time you spend typing and fixing your bugs and what I consider to be the non-intuitive path from the end creation and what your idea is. And so I started creating a three-dimensional programming language, quote unquote. And so I will hopefully briefly show you what it kind of looks like and try and talk you through a little bit how it works without getting into too many details because it could be lengthy. This is very much a development thing. So the basic concept of this is programs are graphs, or can be represented as graphs. I'm not an academic, and I am not particularly specific. I am very liberal with my terms, so I'm probably going to say a lot of things that are maybe a little bit wrong. But here we go anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a very simple Hello World program. There's a lot of different ways you can visually represent that, but the way that I've got this set up is you can just, you add visual elements that have some sort of representation or meaning. So we'll start out, we're going to add a container to the graph. It has a little bit of a name. Let me just move it on the screen a little bit so it's more visible. And by the way, this is horrible alpha software, so the events don't always work as expected. So we've added our container, we're gonna put some stuff in it. So inside this container, was that hard to see? Sorry.
No, I just think it'll look better this way.
Well, I think a long way to look better. I've done all the graphics for this, so one of the ideas behind this, by the way, is the way I built it is it should be completely pluggable as to what represents a visual artifact. So I created stuff in Blender, like these horrible icons you see. Someone could do a much better job, and all I do is just change the name inside a config file, and now you've got a better representation of it, so it should be themable at some point in time. So anyway, we're inside our main container. So anybody familiar with regular programming, like you start out in C, you had like void main, and that was your first block of code, and you're going to do something in that function. So we're now inside our main function, if you will, almost literally from a visual perspective. And so we'll first add a static element. So the static element is, where'd the mouse go? Seriously? Yeah, there we go, okay. The static element is, takes a few clicks to get rid of the menu, because I'm going to do this. My event system is horribly broken. There we go. So static elements are basically just like a static variable inside any other programming language. You give it a value, that's all it gets. So here we'll just type in, banana, question mark. Hello world, I think, is overused. And so now we have a static element that's value is banana inside our program. And I think there's still a lot of, I think that, that should actually show up here when you give it a value, but, we're starting out early here. And if I can get my events back, there we go. And so now we're going to basically, all we're going to do inside of our function is we're going to take that static value and then we're going to return it back outside the container. So all our container or function is going to do is return this static value. So we'll take the static value, we will connect it, and because I'm weird, we have to connect it twice. Once is, so the first thing we've done is this is a square arrow, meaning we're taking the value, values are square, so a square arrow passes a value. So we're passing the value from the static variable into the return function, but we also have to tell the program or the graph, we also want to pass the flow of execution from this static variable to the return value. So we take this, that's this icon over here, click there, and now you have two arrows. Hopefully one day I'll have them so they spread out and you can see them all. Again, not there yet. So all we've done is said, hey, static variable with the value banana is we're passing it to the return function or the return node in the graph, and the return node for the graph is going to send that value back to the main container. And so we'll go back out. So here we are in our main container. Right now we have nothing. It doesn't do much of anything. So why don't we take this and we'll send it to a built-in output method. So it's a round thing, that means built-in, and it's going to be pointing to the out method, which you can see in our configuration, the method is out. It's still all very rudimentary and simplistic. So the first thing we'll do is we will just pass that value over to the method, like this, and then we will also, again, just like before, we have to send the flow, the execution flow along with it. So we've created this graph. That's the fundamental of creating a hello world program. And I'll just save this and exit. So now we have a graph file called out.n. I just didn't get a name when we started, but we can look at that and show you some things later if we want. But it's a JSON file that has a representation of the graph, both in terms of edges and nodes. So these are our node definitions with their positions, their types, their values, if they have it, and all their different parameters. Those are assigned to the nodes. And then you have these rules that are the types of edges. So you'll have a pass rule, a flow rule, a contains rule. So your static is contained by the container, your main container. We can rename those things. So this is what the graph looks like. That's the fundamentals of the program. To show that it works, so I've actually separated, and this is a sort of a deliberate decision, the execution engine and the visual front end are two distinct pieces. And the reasoning behind that is, I hope ultimately that it could be fully distributed. So your graphical engine could connect to your backend runtime on an arbitrary number of nodes anywhere. That's kind of where I want it to go. But that's first things first. So we've got, so just running the interpreter, or the, I guess, runtime, if you will, is just, N is the name of it, because I'm Nate, why wouldn't I do that? And so we just had our map, and since it's a hello world, all it's doing is outputting banana. I think to kind of prove we're actually doing this, though, we can run in debug mode. And so we'll start our map, just type in N to go to the next statement. So we move to the first node in the graph. So the engine finds the first node that doesn't have anything pointing to it in the top outermost container. So it finds that. It finds a container. It's called extra atomic curtain because it picks out random names for stuff. And it's got, these are the targets that are connected to this container. So this container contains those two other nodes, the return and the static, and it has both flow and a pass relationship to the built-in that runs output. So we first call the container, then the container calls, the engine goes into the container, calls the static node, because that was the first unaffiliated, it doesn't have anybody else pointing to it inside that container. So it says, hey static node, what am I supposed to do? Looks at that, says, okay, you got a value banana. We know that you're pointed to, you have a source edge that points to you, but that's a container, so we'll ignore that for now. And then we look at what are your targets. Oh, we're going to pass your value to the return node, and we're going to flow then execution to the return node. So now, next operation, go to the return node. It's got a name. It's now got a value banana because the graph traversed to that point. It's going to return that node, that value banana back when it passes. Oh no, it doesn't have any sources, excuse me. Because it's the node is a return, it knows automatically, say, hey, I'm leaving this container now. So it's going to say, who's my container? And it's looking at its source here, the node container, all that stuff, extra atomic curtain. And it knows, okay, sending this control back. And you can see actually down here it says it's following following that contains rule back to the container. So then this calls the flow from the container to the, what do you call it, the built-in. We're going to run the built-in, which again has it doesn't have anybody after it, and there is our output banana. So that is my visual programming language, presumably in about 5 minutes or less. Any questions on any time, what about it?
Holy shit.
That is cool.
Thank you.
That sounds familiar. I think we said something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? The only thing, sorry, go ahead.
Good.
You started first.
What's the motivation for having a separate data flow and control flow graph?
Partly because I'm trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing. I've never written a runtime environment before. I played with it both ways, actually. So I kind of toyed with it a little while, allowing the data flow to imply the execution flow. And I just kind of got myself into a hole of, okay, I can't, first let's get things to work. Because in theory, you could kind of figure out the path by looking at, hey, this guy doesn't have any flow or doesn't have anything coming out. We can actually start here, go backwards up the tree, and figure out, oh, I need you to resolve, I need you to resolve, I need you to resolve to get back to this point. Where it really became sticky is when I started implementing the debugger and trying to figure out how to do that recursively, but not recursively, because I had to pause at every step in the iteration. Keeping track of that state was more than my little brain could handle. So I just, that's why I did it that way.
Do you require every node to be connected, every node except one to be connected by flow edges?
Not necessarily. So it does have some logic when you get to a node and you execute it. So basically, each node is processed in 3 steps. The first step is resolve your sources. So if I have unresolved sources, figure that out. So if there's things pointing to me. Then the next is do whatever execution is built into the node itself. So the return node, for example, sets a state on its container. The data node might do something else. The static node just says, hey, this is my value. And then as I add more node types, it's going to be more interesting. The built-in node, for example, just calls the output command when it executes. Then, once those things are done, it calls all its targets. So it says, follow all of my edges that I go to targets and execute those in whatever sequence it feels like. The interesting part of that is when you're executing, if you're executing a container, the container has to execute the things inside it first. So, hey, I'm a container, I contain a whole bunch of other stuff, and so the container then moves the runtime into its interior and then evaluates its contents and says, where do I start? If it's got, presently I don't have the ability to draw a flow from the container into an interior object, but it could in theory have, if there's a flow that says, hey, container, start here, you could do that. Right now it just says, who doesn't have any sources, I'm going to start with each of those, and then process the graph from there. I have no idea what happens if I have more than one node that doesn't have sources. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen. It'll be one of those things I find out someday. Maybe. We'll see.
There's something interesting there. I can't put my finger on what it is exactly, but
I think there's going to be some interesting discovery for me, just because if you think about, if you conceptualize a program that way, like the whole optimization question becomes huge, because you could really interrogate this differently. You start moving in a distributed fashion, and you can pass state around between these things. I mean, that's not really a new idea, but
we also have explicit control flow and okay, so the data edges could you give an example of a case where you would want so I can see a case where you'd want a control edge but not a data edge.
Yeah.
But could you give an example of where you have a data edge but you wouldn't want a control edge?
Laziness, really. The only reason I've been able to come up with it, and I'm not going to say this is the only thing, but this is all I've come up with, is I don't feel like drawing twice. So if a data edge sources into something, if you don't have flow, you don't have the execution, you just have the data flow. When the node it's passing to gets evaluated, in theory, it would implicitly resolve that source edge, that data edge, and pull that data in at that point in time. Right. So rather than drawing it twice. There's probably a lot of other reasons you could do it. And this is not even 1.0. I mean, we're pretty early on. But there's a lot of, I mean, conceptually, I think it provides a different way to think about solving some problems. And hopefully I can get enough different node types in there that it kind of makes sense. I've already got the ability to import other maps. I call these three things maps. So I can import one map into another one and do stuff with it. So that could be, I could have another map over here that does some things, and I could call it, I could have it send output. I'm working on importing Python modules. So I can actually, you pull in the Python module, and I'm not going to try and show this because it's not going to work. But you would just click on the menu, and when you're inside that container that you've imported into, it'll give you a list of all the exposed functions inside the Python module. So you could then call those functions inside the Python module from this.
And some of those functions could have side effects, which might be a useful reason to have separate data and control.
Possibly so, yeah.
I understand why you would call that a map, because it's accurate, but maybe just marketing-wise, that could be a world or a universe.
Sure.
Yeah, and inside the next object, you're in a new universe.
I've toyed with it a lot, and what I so the whole thing's called NORD. What it stands for is no round data. That was the first little conceptual thing I thought about, which was, here you are in this kind of three-dimensional programming thing. Should there be some rules of thumb? So, for example, if you are running this in some sort of distributed and worldwide fashion, how do you trust or know what it is you're dealing with? So if you open up, if you view the source on your web page, for example, how do you know what you've got is safe? And so I'd say if I open up something that's got all kinds of round things in it, round things are executable, they're active, they can do stuff, maybe I should, not do this. If I see a whole bunch of square things, they're safe. They can't perform an action on my thing. So that's where Nord came from. But when I started with Nord, I was like, oh, that's also North in I don't know how many different languages. And I picked out this whole nautical thing that I went with. So map, inside the code, it's like Carta in some languages. The two programs themselves have navigational themes, but it could be anything. And I'm totally open to.
So your debugger might be a sextant.
Sure, absolutely.
Stars.
Back to the snake reference from earlier. Anything else?
This is really impressive, I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks, guys.
Would anybody else like to offer a talk before we vote?
I might do one, but just to gauge the room. How many people work with fuzzy logic? Yeah. Anybody care about working with it?
Oh, yeah.
You have?
I'd love to know more.
Oh,
I
okay.
have not done much with it.
All right, I'll
Yeah.
do a quick thing on the, what's the voting about?
We have a prize for the speakers.
Oh. I don't think I'm into that.
I'm debating doing one.
Where was the good marker? That one was dry.
I have markers if you don't have markers.
Oh, okay.
The green one is also,
I was working in the department, I just had to use this again recently, but I was working in the Department of Geography as a grad student, and I had realized that the geometric mean got me to fuzzy logic, and the geometric mean is usually a function that's built into most software. So
You can erase those numbers if it's helpful, the 11 through 15 there.
sure, I have a bunch of people come in. So
this one, we'll have to pre-point the camera.
So and and or get you to most things that you care about in logic. But a lot of times in life, we run into these things where customer surveys, you fill in a 0 to 10 on your satisfaction. So you're in a fuzzy land, and it's hard to nail these things down. So the geometric mean is, in summation formula, it's your xi's, right? Something like that. Your product of. So you got x1 times x2 times x3 and so forth. Well, if you force your x sub i's to be inside the boundary of 0 to 1, and that's, that's the open interval, so you can't hit either end. Okay, this is your OR, and if you do the product of 1 plus your x sub I, oh, sorry, that's the and. And this is your OR. So what happens with the geometric mean, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one last detail. So pi sub I, you need the root, the ith root of these things. That's the finisher. All right, so like in finance is where the geometric mean is most popular, because if you have a bank account that earns 5% a year, you've got the current amount you invested, and then at the end of the year you get 5%. So your investment times 5% gives you your new amount when you add them together. So it's 1.05 that you multiply by your initial investment. That's your new investment for next year. So now in the new year, you're still multiplying 1.05 times the current. So the geometric mean is saying 1.05 times the number of years you're investing, right? Well, when you're stuck in this interval here for all your inputs, the product, whenever there's one element that's close to zero, this whole thing bangs down to a really low value. With this one, it's very tolerant of zeros. So it's gonna stay close to the one unless you have a lot of zeros, right? So it's this really nice thing that you run a geometric mean. Oh, there's one other detail. When you add the one,
Should that be 1 minus that product?
what's
Or
that?
minus 1?
Yeah. Afterwards, you gotta take the one back out. So it's just a real handy way to take data that's difficult, subjective stuff and mangle it into, like one of the applications I think I was doing was, there were certain things that we could measure about income in an area and the level of schooling and all these different factors, and we had crime data to compare it against. So I did fuzzy logic with this method and the mapping to see if there was a link between, I mean, it was a project, but a link between bad parenting and crime statistics, because that's all we had to work with. But that's a fun and handy thing, fuzzy logic and an OR. So that's it.
Cool.
I don't think there's any questions, right?
Can it do you have to be to exclude 0 and 1?
If you're not on that open interval between 0 and 1 with your inputs, you're gonna, stray off really fast. To be like a fuzzy logic thing, you gotta take any of your inputs and force them into the 0-1 interval.
So you're basically assuming that there are no artifacts.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Because now you're into, but I guess you could be clever and combine your fuzzy logic with your hard facts later separately, but.
So this is if you want to combine statistics, basically, that are already, summary statistics that are not necessarily directly related, but you don't understand the relationship between them. You can say, if I want to say this and this,
Yeah.
I would apply this to those statistics and kind of group it or organize it.
Yeah.
Cool.
I had really planned on giving a talk, and I usually give a talk on a completely different subject that I'm really good at, so I'm just going to kind of wing this one. I have no idea. So what I'm going to talk about is mind mapping, and this is a way of working through a solution. You've got a bunch of different things that are all kind of related to your central concept, and you're trying to figure out a way to either group them or a way to organize them in some meaningful method. So you'd first start your center, and you'd pick a topic.
What software do you use?
This is called XMind. They have a free version for Windows, and it's pretty, actually that's not a great one, sorry. Let's do that one. So you look at the things, for instance, what brings, what leads to success, and there's, I can't spell, so, but we won't worry about that one. And there might be, so basically you pick different things that are related to success. You don't have to necessarily organize them in any way. This is a function of organizing them. So then what you would do is, once you have a bunch of things, since I didn't plan on doing this talk, it's just something that's been floating in my head. You basically list all of the things that to you, for instance, lead to success. And there's probably 30 or 40 different things that all could be lead to success. And then you turn around and you'd organize those. Once you can't think of anything else that leads to success, you try to group those things. And the greatest power about this is you can try to think through a problem and keep it in your head. But mind mapping lets you write it all down, and then once you, once you can actually put this here and, you know, move this around. And I haven't played with this application. I just installed it a few minutes ago because I couldn't find the one I used to use. But you could maybe make a cloud around this. You could draw lines between these two, arrows, curved lines.
Visio has a mind mapping thing, but it's a pain in the ass to use.
It is. I've used the Visio one. The Visio one is okay. This is an application just designed for mind mapping. When I started my own small business, I looked at all of the things, I wish I could show you that one, it's not on this machine. All of the things that are important to me, and then I organized them and prioritized them by what I thought I could sell. You know, what would be a saleable thing from this list. You know, so it's stuff that I enjoy and also it's saleable. The success one is something I've recently been thinking about because just stuff in my life. And the one thing I've determined is that there's now no such thing. Luck does not pertain to success. If you put luck up here, I can exclude luck from every other option that I've been able to come up with that leads to success. And just luck doesn't apply to any of those things. So, and it was something that was, you know, amazing to me once I finally, you know, worked it all out. But I don't have the mind map for it yet. I have to go back and redo it and make sure I didn't miss anything. But, so this, and you can see from some of the themed examples, I'm not sure if it will let me even open them wider. But you can see that, you know, it's, and there's good examples online, like this one is what they have people doing in their application. So this is, you know, a business plan, and they have some strategic stuff and some financial stuff, and they've worked around it. You know, they've split it out about who belongs with where, and you know what might have just a flow diagram that you can build off of. When you're doing your plan, what, you know, these are all the things that are in it, and how do you define them, and how do you, and this lets you make sure you don't miss something. And you can do this for all sorts of topics. You can do this for programming. You can do this for, you know, figuring out, you know, what you're going to do for vacation, whatever you'd like. It's very flexible, and it helps you by basically writing it down in a way that, you know, when you're thinking about it later, you can't forget it.
So if for my system analysis and design course next semester, I use this as a mind map for requirements gathering, for example.
Yeah. It's.
I can, okay. I
You
see
plan
it.
your whole course on it.
What's that?
Your central thing could be systems design course.
Right.
And then all of the
Break off
things that
sections,
you
every
want.
thought you have, you can start organizing it.
You know, you want to do you want them to know something, so you put that on one leaf. You want them to know something else.
Right. Okay.
Right, and then at each one of those, you would put the things that are unique to that, and then maybe you'll realize that when you're starting to write down these things, you'll say, well, this thing falls into like these three categories. And then you can maybe decide, okay, well, maybe rather than teaching it 3 different times across this group of things, I can take this concept and move it to its own node and develop it. And then in all of these other cases, when it comes up, you just reference it. Rather than reiterating it, you know, at each individual point. And this would let you see that that happens prior to actually doing it. Because it's a process or a flow that you're working through.
Okay.
sounded great for like brainstorming, just get your stuff
Yeah.
out there, and then you can organize it,
Yes.
and
It's
then
the
you-
Drunken Tribal Council and the Sober Tribal Council.
Well, this is the transition path.
Yeah.
Yes.
You start with one and end up with the other.
So you.
This is
you-
morning after council.
Yeah.
So this might have started out as these things and all of this other stuff, just a single little line someplace. You know, and then once they were sitting down, okay, well, this needs to go here, and this piece needs to go there, and, you know, where else do we need this type of information, and that defines the links between the different things. So I found that this to be, even if you're not doing it as a group, but as a group too, because you tell people that, you know, you're working on a business plan, and the first, 15 or 20 minutes is just people throwing ideas. And you just throw ideas at it. And don't worry about organizing, you don't do anything at all with organizing them. Make sure you get them all down, then you can start playing around. Something might come up, like you forgot about it while you're organizing it, but I found that usually, once you get to the point where people have run out of ideas to put up onto the list, there's not too many more to add after you start organizing it, because you've gotten most of them. I mean, it helps you conceptualize, and it might help also if somebody is more a visual thinker versus a process thinker, or depending on how they conceptualize data. So if they conceptualize data visually, this is a really powerful tool. And that's pretty much it. But this is just an example of the things that you can do with it.
Cool.
And it's really straightforward. I mean, you don't have to use Visio. I've used it. It's a lot of straight lines, and it doesn't work well with like rearranging things, and it wants you to predefine all the concept types. Visio is good if you want to lay one of these things out for somebody else that you've already drawn. Because
Yes.
I can tell you from working with this tool or a different version of the similar tool, if I were to grab this node and drag it, that line would still stay connected, and it would just let me drag it wherever I wanted on the screen. Because once it's attached, it's attached.
Cool.
So you can rearrange things, you can break them off of things. It's just.
I was trying to use a Visio mind map in the middle of the meeting while we're doing it. I was going crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not very good. This looks cool. Thank you.
Sure. And this is available for basically every platform. If you go to the Wikipedia page, they actually have well, I didn't go to the Wikipedia page, but there used to be a list on Wikipedia of all of the mind mapping tools. But you can see here from the I just did, so this is interesting engineering, this is e-learning, this is marketing, this is, I don't know what Medium is. There's a Windows report, mind mapping tools. It's not pigeonholed to one type of area that it works well in. So, there we go. Of course, I'm not connected to, my Wi-Fi is over there. But it's just a lot of fun. That's pretty much it.